have that if you're going to be doing this late swapping, you need to have the mental fortitude to understand that it can go awry too. It might be best if you're going to make the swap, just tell yourself, I'm not going to calculate the score for where this would have ended up if I had not made the swap. Unless you end up winning a ton of money, then go back and calculate the score.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by Underdog. We're taking a look at DFS NFL strategy from where to start, tournament selection, how to build your rosters, tips to do, things to avoid, and how to manage your money. What should you be doing when you start out this season? Joining me, as always, from ShipItNation.com, Tyler Tamboline. What's going on, my man?
What's happening? We're back. Golf's done, and we're on to the NFL, but it's always running around. We got the Ryder Cup coming soon, but excited for NFL, big season ahead, and love talking DFS when it comes to strategy. That's my favorite thing.
It is, and you have the DFSmastermind.com as well if people are looking for more in-depth on this certain topic and specific topics in particular. But we wanted to bring in someone new, someone who's been very successful in the DFS streets, who's won a bunch of money, even maybe has won a millionaire maker in the past, John Breslin, 4for4.com. If anyone wants to get in on the DFS product, the fantasy football product, on the new SharpStack app, the betting app, which will manage your bankroll, give you EV plays, 4for4.com/Mayo will get you 25% off all those packages. John, you were just at the, Fantasy Baseball World Championship?
Yeah, exactly. Up in Boston. Actually, I saw Tambo there as well. It's good to be here. Good to be doing a show with Tambo again. But yeah, it's just came back from the DraftKings Fantasy Baseball World Championship up in Boston.
Yeah, you didn't win, did you?
Nah, finished 13th place. I had one entry, so 13th was pretty decent out of 100.
All right. Well, you can follow John on Twitter if you're looking for him at @JBreslin. Up there right now, and Squirrel Patrol is his handle. Can you give people a bit of a background on your DFS history? People know that I suck, Tambo's good. Where do you sit?
Yeah, so I just joined 4for4 this offseason actually. Pretty recently, but I wrote a whole article about my why you should play DFS in 2025. I included my history there. Yeah, I started playing about 10 years ago. I went to my first live final, the Fanduel Baseball Championship in 2018. I won that, and the rest is kind of history. I finished first and second place both in their Fanduel World Basketball Championship 2021. And then I won a Millie Maker in football with DraftKings in 2023. That was actually just a few weeks after I finished second place in their Fantasy Baseball World Championship, which was another $600,000. And then I just won a couple months ago. I won my first DraftKings live final, the UFC Fantasy World Championship. That was up in New Jersey. But it was a great UFC card. So yeah, you've been playing DFS for a long time. I'm really passionate about the game. So yeah, excited to be here talking about DFS.
And you have a Millie Maker in football.
Yes. Yeah. 2023, September 2023.
So basically, it's a lot like what Tambo has said for a very long time, John, that it really doesn't matter the daily fantasy sport. It seems like you're able to wrap your mind around what the actual strategy is behind winning, regardless of how much or how little you know about one of these sports. Like, how much do you know about UFC?
Actually, a lot more than I used to. I started playing UFC during COVID, like a lot of people, when it was the first sport to come back. But I'll say that it's true. You don't necessarily need to know a ton, about the really nitty gritty about every sport to play DFS in that sport. You just have to have kind of a basic concept or decent projections, even if you don't have even a basic concept of how the sport goes. And then it's all about balancing kind of projections and correlation, and then the ownership that you think each individual player is going to have, no matter what the DFS sport is.
Tambo, you've been on this for a lot of times. It's not who you play, it's how you play them. And I've seen you have success in basketball. I don't know if you've ever watched basketball in your life.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm excited to be on here with John, though. John's a major winner and a top 10, player in the world across all sports. And I think that's kind of what he just talked about, laying out all those different things. And you're teeing it up now for me. But with DFS Mastermind, with you and I talking, Pat, it's always the same thing. And I've been using the chess analogy a lot lately. And by the way, I don't even play chess. I just think it's the most fitting for this. Is the board is the same. The pieces are the same. A lot of people that's the slate. That's the players on the slate. A chess master is thinking like 10 to 15 moves ahead versus somebody that's just coming in. We talk about shitter lineups, stuff like that. It's like, oh, this kind of looks good. This move makes sense. But there's other people that are thinking about the game a lot more, and there's different levels to it. So yeah, I've been using the chess analogy a lot lately. People trying to give their pieces magic powers via, the model and this said that. Like, it's good to have fun with it, but there is people playing at the highest level that are working on their game around the clock, and it's focused on DFS and not the sport. You don't have to play football to be really good at NFL DFS.
Well, John, we had to bring you in because I had a losing season last year in NFL DraftKings after Tambo coaching me through 2 very good years in a row. I was very excited about that. Then I went back down in the minus. So we need to bring you in some extra help. I am the avatar for the audience, the guy that likes to build lineups with my own intuition, try to correlate it properly, and hopefully not lose my entire bankroll. So if you are coaching me through this, and maybe we should start with how much should you be playing? And if you have a set amount that you can play, how do you allocate that every single week? What's the first thing that you tell people?
So I think that's the best place to start, is like contest selection and bankroll management. The first thing that I would say is you want to fill up low dollar contests as much as you can before you get to higher dollar contests. You want to be playing kind of the lowest dollar contests you can, because it really gets harder exponentially as you move up in stakes. So if you've got like $100 bankroll and you think you want to do 20 lineups or so, you want to be looking for like a $3, $4, $5 contest that you can enter. And then I would also suggest that you probably fill up single entry before you get to multi-entry. So even if you say you want to do 5 lineups, like maybe you want to pick 5 single entry contests and enter a different lineup, each of your 5 lineups in one of those single entry contests before you move on to trying to get a DFS optimizer and run 150 lineups and enter it in one of the $20 or $15 lottery style contests.
Tambo, how do you manage what your bankroll is going to be? Because I know a lot of people, myself included, being like, I'm going to put in $500 at the beginning of the year. I'm going to try to play 100, 200 every single week. That's not true. I'll put in 1,000 at the beginning of the year, and I'll play 500 week 1. But if I lose that 1,000, I'm re-upping. So what's my real bankroll?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And I think even like before the bankroll management contest selection stuff, I talk about DFS goals. They're not, you don't have to be like a goal setter and have your book and write them all down if you don't want to, but you should at least know what you're trying to accomplish. Now, I get it. For most people, it is win money, get rich, win the milli, all those factors that people talk about and would love to happen. For John, it's happened. For me, a few close calls. I definitely would like that to happen. But I think the biggest thing people overlook is that, that whole process you just talked about, Pat. Some people don't know if they can re-up. They just start strong and say, oh, week 1 has a ton of amazing contests. Let me jam all the money in. And then week 2, they're back to the drawing board. And then how much money is left behind? There is showdown slates. There is, American Thanksgiving is a great slate. There's short slates day to day. There's all kinds of different things. There's multiple sites that you can play on. So you really have to think about what it is you want to do outside of the obvious. You want to win a bunch of money. A lot of people want to lose weight. There is time in the gym. There is recipes. There is cooking, meal prepping, all this. There's things that go into getting to the ultimate goal. And so that's kind of the thought process around it. But for you putting that money in, just you got to know what your disposable income is and sort of what you can do on a week-to-week basis after that.
Would you agree, John, that you need to have that set in stone before going in, or at least have the knowledge of, hey, I have $100. If I lose that, I'll probably upload another 100. Does that change what you have to do in the tournaments that you pick?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be set in stone, but maybe written in pen, is a better idea. But no, I think you need to have some idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and then have some parameters, some kind of guardrails around that. I think it is really a good idea to think about, well, am I just trying to have fun here? Because if you're really just trying to have fun and, you expect that, you're putting on $100, you're not going to re-up or whatever, then I think it's okay. If you want to just try to play in the $15 milli maker, you're putting 1 entry in and you just love the idea that, hey, I could win $1 million on this Sunday, then it's okay. Just go have some fun, pick a wacky lineup if you want to do that. But it's important to have an idea of what your goals are, and then also kind of have some guardrails or, some parameters based around those goals.
Tambo, what would you say expectations should be? This isn't even for people who are brand new to playing on DraftKings or Fanduel or playing the pick'em game on Underdog, whatever it might be. But people like me, man, I've been playing DFS now for 11, 12 years, whatever it might be. And I've had some good seasons. I've had some bad seasons. The good seasons have not been outweighed by the bad seasons, but I've been pretty good at not losing a ton when I have losing years. So my expectations going into every season is if I could just break even, I mean, I would love to win. My goal would be to win money and maybe try to take down a big GPP. I play a lot in the $150 3 max, the $250 4 max. I don't play a lot of the milli maker type stuff. But at the same time, what should people's expectations be? Because even out of 18 weeks during the main slate in regular season NFL football, Tambo, how many weeks do you think you actually win?
Oh, it could be 2. Could be, it's like that's the way it goes. You're playing for the one good day, the one good week, whatever that looks like. Obviously, if you get more on top, that would be better. But as far as expectations goes, your true expectation should be to know that you're going to lose a lot more than you're going to win. But back to everything we've already talked about so far of kind of, again, doesn't have to be set in stone, but having some sort of idea. You can't win in week 12 for it to be your one big week if you don't have any money remaining because you blew it all in the first 11 weeks. So you're going to lose a lot more than you're going to win. You just talked about it, Pat, yourself personally, as you, like I said, the customer avatar, the standard DFS avatar, if you will, 2 good years of winning in NFL and then a down year. It happens. The sample size, there's only 18 main slates on, for the regular season in NFL. So it can be very possible to lose all of those. Maybe you make it up in Showdown. Maybe you don't make it up at all, but maybe next year is the year you win the live final and win all kinds of money and more. I mean, there's going to be ups and downs. I'd be curious to hear John's take on it, but I think as far as expectations go, but mine are always to be realistic with the people. And it's certainly that you're going to lose more than you're going to win, but you cannot be around to win if you don't take care of the rest of the stuff we already talked about.
Yeah, I'll say I think that's absolutely critical. And I think what you said about breaking even, you kind of said, just break even. Breaking even is amazing because if you have an opportunity to win $1 million every week, but you just keep breaking even, at some point you're going to hopefully win the $1 million, right? Like if you extend it out over enough time. So like breaking even is actually really good. That means you're beating the rake. So you're doing something right there. And that is why the contest selection and bankroll management is really important. Like the longer you can stay in the game breaking even, then you're actually kind of winning something because you're winning that option to have finished first place at some point and take down the $100,000 or the $1 million, depending on the contest that you're playing.
So, John, when you look back at even last season or even the past 3 years, like what would you say out of 18 weeks, how often are you turning a profit on those weeks? Or are you kind of the same way? It's either you're going to win all the monies or you're just going to kind of lose that week.
Yeah. So my instinct I don't know off the top of my head, my guess is probably 3 to 5 or 6 weeks out of like 17, 18 every year in NFL football are probably winning weeks. The important thing for me is I don't want to have a week where I just get wiped out, right? And that goes into like how you play multi-entry. Like I have a diversified set of lineups. So I'm playing, probably every quarterback or close to every quarterback each week in my main slate NFL Sunday portfolio, right? I'm playing them up to a percentage that I think is their percentage of being on the winning lineup. So yeah, I would say that the majority of weeks I'm going to lose money. That's true in all sports. That's true NBA. The majority of the time in NBA, I'm going to lose money. Majority of time, like most days in baseball, I'm going to lose money. The idea is that when you win money, you're winning $100,000 or you're winning $1 million. And that is then setting you up for the whole next, year, 2 years. So yeah, you're going to lose money. The majority. I think of it like being a baseball hitter, right? Like if you get a hit 1 out of every 3 times, they put you in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think for me, because I know a lot of people who are watching this right now are definitely not going to be the people playing 150 entries and maxing everything out. And if you do want to do that and you want to get more advice on how to play that way, 4for4.com/Mayo will get you all of John's work, shipitnation.com, dfsmastermind.com for all of Tambo, where they really do dig into that stuff. And along with the 4for4 subscription, you're going to get the DFS optimizer, you're going to get the projections, you'll get a Discord to bounce stuff off of. But Tambo, what I really want to hammer down on is how most people end up playing, which is, maybe I'll max out the 20 max $3, or I'll throw 5 entries into the Millionaire Maker. I mean, that's not what I do. I have sort of resigned myself to the point where you and I make lineups on the show, and hopefully John will join us to make lineups this year, and I'll throw those in like the $10 18 max or something. But what I'm really trying to do is find out what are my 3 or 4 best lineups, play higher dollar single entry or the 3 max, 4 max, and play those as if they're single entry and narrow that down. Do you think that's a better strategy for people who are going in with $250 a week or $500 a week rather than just trying to win $1 million every time?
Yeah, to John's point earlier, I mean, you should certainly be playing the lower stakes you can. I always use the poker analogy for that because people, if I just go up to the high stakes table with the best players in the world, they'll respect my bluffs and raises. It's like, no, they got all the money from people like you. Now they're going to get even more from somebody like you. And that's how they got to the higher stakes and the higher tables. So to your other point though, Pat, definitely, I think one thing you said there is like, you're trying to figure out what your best lineups are. And that goes to what I'm talking about too, of the sustainability and how long you want to play. It doesn't have to be my goal is to be a pro player or any, because I don't think it is for very many people. And it's tough if that was your goal. But the point would be you're working on finding your game. So I always think if you're a 20 lineup player, you should still be trying to figure out what does single entry look like? Because what if you happen to win some more money and then want to play some more or move up in stake? Well, how would you know what your process is to move to the next thing? So I think you should be working on that. I'll stick to another line that I always have. It's a one-liner, but if you play lighter, play tighter. And that could be less money or it could be less lineups. But if I play like 5 lineups, it's to each their own, but I'm not trying to run 5 quarterbacks. I'm honestly running like 5 to 6 quarterbacks on 150 lineups. So that's my style. But just to say it, like, I don't think you should be trying to do a million different things just because you have 20 lineups and use 20 different quarterbacks and think, oh, I covered all the angles. I can assure you, you did not. So that's my thoughts there. And I think John wants to jump in. Go ahead.
No, I'll just say, yeah, if you play 20 lineups and you play 20 different quarterbacks, there's a good chance that one of your quarterbacks is going to hit, but then, there's a good chance that your 19 other lineups are not going to cash. So that's important to keep in mind is you want to be playing like a plausible kind of percentage portfolio. So when I talk about playing every single quarterback on an NFL Sunday, that's out of 150 lineups. I figure and I don't always play every quarterback, but most weeks, Spencer Rattler has a 1 in 150 chance of being the quarterback you need to have. So, week 1, I might play one Spencer Rattler lineup, but I may not play more.
Fantasy football season is back with a vengeance. You can get yourself the best tools possible this year, be it for season long, DFS, or betting, whatever it is you need, you can get it at 4for4.com/Mayo. The most accurate projections and rankings in the business. 4 different levels. Code Mayo will get you 25% off everything. And you can upgrade. Just the classic, season long, $39 a season. You can go monthly. That's going to cost you double. You should just buy it for the season. And then you get down to the betting package, $249 per season, minus 25%. For Code Mayo, you get the props, the sides, the total bets, the tackle props, the player prop tool, the betting Discord, the articles, and everything else included in every other package. Get on it now so you can win your league. 4for4.com/Mayo. For over a century, Johnnie Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereux Golf, Johnnie Walker introduces the Johnnie Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnniewalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Part of my wellness routine this year has been focus more on family and focus more on Pat Mayo. So I've been doing fewer shows, upping the exercise, eating better. If you have kids, it's just daily, nonstop grinding every single day. Couple that with workplace stress, and it's a bit difficult. Workplace stress right now is one of the top causes of declining mental health, with 61% of the global workforce experiencing a higher than normal amount of stress. So maybe BetterHelp is exactly what you need to do. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you feel anything going on with you, you need to go to betterhelp.com/PatMayo right now. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/PatMayo. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PatMayo. When we start to think about this in terms of single entry, I'll put single entry and 3-max into one bucket versus what you're going to play in one of these giant tournaments where people can enter up to 20 times, 50 times, 150 times, and you know that these are the types of players that you're going up against. For a worse player, John, do you think it's better to play in the single entry or 3-max or try to take on with a random bullet these 150? Basically, you two.
So, sorry, if you're a worse player.
Yeah, if you're me, do I have a better chance at beating you and winning a tournament in a single entry or 150 max?
I'd say it depends on your goals a little bit and like how important that bankroll is to you. I would say single entry generally is easier than the lottery style contest, and the reason for that is probably more math than anything strategic. Just that those big lottery style contests like the Million Maker, like in order to make money at that over time, you probably have to win it or finish top 3, and that contest might have 150,000 people in it. So you have maybe a 1 in 50,000 chance of paying of getting a spot that pays off your eventual total entry fees. I'd say single entry, just because of the smaller size of the contest, like you have a better chance of like finishing in a place because of like the tiered payout structure. So much of the prize pool goes to first place, second place, and third place. Like that's going to be easier over a shorter amount of time to pay off in single entry.
Tambo, I've had the most success in the 3-max entries, even though I only played the one lineup in them. And you and I will talk through a lot of lineups on the show, and we generally do that for the larger contest, but then I'll usually pick one of those, the one that I like the best at least for those. I know a lot of people try to play those conservatively. They don't take as many chances, but I've actually found in those tournaments, not to take a chance at every single position, but if I have a conviction, I remember the Darius Slayton week last week. I think that was my one big winning week that no one was going to play this. Guys were going to barely play him in the Millionaire Maker. In single entry and 3-max, he just wasn't getting rostered, but I liked the spot. It saved me a bunch of money, and it allowed me to be different at the bottom and do whatever I kind of wanted to do at the top.
Yeah, Darius break the Slayton, and that was the week we made it. We made 50 lineups on the show that week, and he was in 48 of them. And I was like, okay, so we've got either a really good thing here or a problem. But just to note it, I mean, that's kind of the thought process too. I will say in single entry, where it's been talked about plenty in the past, but for newer players listening or watching, like the idea of you need to pull less levers in a single entry. You can make more mistakes and get away with it. While true, yes, you oftentimes the winning score in a single entry due to the smaller field and less combinations is less than what's going to happen in the $20 Millie Maker. The difference is that if you do just make that one move, Pat, like if it's Slayton over Wan'Dale Robinson that week, who costs $2,000 more, maybe that gets you a better running back, and your lineup isn't as off the wall as some people think. I think when people go to single entry, they either tighten up way too much and end up with almost a cash lineup where it's just so not over-owned, but there's not much leverage in there is the best way to put it. Or they go way too far off the wall and they're like, well, if just these 6 things happen, the other 3 seem like the stone nuts. Well, yeah, you're building a 6-game parlay now, and others can still have pieces of that and combinations that might outdo you. So I think that's a couple just quick tips on single entry, 3-max, however you're thinking about it. But I do still like playing for a bit of a ceiling, and as well as because you still got to win the tournament, as well as just pulling a few different levers on spots that might make more sense, get you a little bit more money, and maybe get you to a different roster construction overall.
I'll just add, I think Tambo really hit on something that's key to all of DFS there, that a lot of people are playing with no idea of what the projections say. So they have something that's completely off the wall. And it's all just football takes. And then other people that have access to good projections are just playing the highest projected lineup or the first, handful of projected lineups. So there's no differentiation. So you see like a defense, defense has hugely variant scoring. You'll see like the Cincinnati defense is 40% owned in like a single entry contest because it just projects as like the best, point per dollar defense that day on DraftKings. And really what you want is just some knowledge of what the highest projected lineup is going to be, or what, the highest projected players in each position are going to be. And then insert a couple of football takes. Like hey, but like instead of the touchdown going to Tyreek Hill, what happens if it goes to Jalen Waddle, right? And then that's just flipping the script on like 30-40% of the lineups in that contest if you get that football take right.
So thinking about it in terms of projections, John, so if I just go to 4for4.com/Mayo to get that 25% off and I just hit best lineup possible and it spits me out whatever it is. I know there's a lot of people out there who's simply going to put those into 50-50s and cash lineups, but Tambo and I tried to do this on the show where we take that lineup and then manipulate it for a GPP lineup. Is that a better way, like a reverse engineering what we know this is what basically the best players are looking at, who the best projected players are. How can we make a lineup that's comparable but way different? Is that a decent strategy?
I think that's an excellent strategy. One of the things that always strikes me about DFS is that usually I'm doing a Sunday morning NFL show or a Sunday morning like Discord chat, and the number of like way off the wall esoteric players, fourth string wide receivers that I'm getting asked about on Sunday morning. Right? What about this guy? Like, well, I don't know. He might be very fast, but he's going to be on the sideline, so I don't think it matters. So you want to take have some concept of what the highest projected lineup is going to be, and then just differentiate it in a couple of different ways that maybe make sense in a correlated fashion. Let's say you have an idea. Everybody else is taking this quarterback wide receiver pairing. That's going to be the most popular quarterback wide receiver pairing. Like instead of from a very high scoring game, we'll just play the running back from that game and play, a quarterback wide receiver that's maybe 2 or 3 down the line in terms of the most popular. You're kind of covering the idea. Well, what if that other game is just ends up, they take the air out of the ball, or they're rushing the ball all game. And so you have an idea of what could happen overall on Sunday, and you're just making a couple of tweaks based off of your football thoughts from the highest projected lineups.
So Tambo, it sounds like what John is saying is use the projections, use a little bit of ball knowing to tweak that. Then I'm guessing that the ownership then becomes one of the major factors in how you're entering a tournament.
Yeah, I think the ball knowing is great. Like it can add, but I think it's more if you know DFS. Like people say, oh, I know ball, and it never hurts. I'm just saying there's also a lot of ball knowers that are like that John guy. I don't know if he ever put on pads, but how is he always at the top of the NFL DFS? Because he doesn't have to play football. But it's a quick tangent, but I think it's important because John hit on it. This is the perfect time to tie it in. And it goes back to my chess analogy, or you can use like a condo building. The penthouse is the place to be, right at the top. There's different levels to it. And the ball knowing isn't as important, in my opinion, as the DFS knowing. Brenton Strange was really popular last year at $2,500 as a tight end at a onesie position. Lots of players, even novice players, knew to just plug him in. Fine, that's great. Secondary level of the condo complex, or like using the same chess pieces and being moves ahead, was, well, wait, Brian Thomas Jr. is pretty popular too. I heard Tambo say this, or people talk about it. I can combo them up because at their price tag now they just kind of need to do anything. But wait, we're in a large field tournament. If I need to get to my ceiling there, and those guys actually have a ceiling outcome, maybe Mac Jones would come along for the ride. Oh, but he sucks. Doesn't matter. We don't care. I probably believe he sucks too, but he makes perfect sense in this instance. But oh wait, level 4 now. We're going up the apartment building here. Oh, if they're going to actually push him, we need a ceiling outcome from the other side. They're playing the Jets. We've got the running back Brees Hall. We've got Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. Okay. If you keep going up, I'll stop the tangent, but just to say it actually won the Fantasy Football World Championship last year, was even beyond the Mac Jones with the run back. The winning lineup was actually at the penthouse, Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Brian Thomas Jr., all 3 wide receiver positions used up in one game stack. And then we go back to the very level base floor 1 and put Brenton Strange in. Long tangent, but it's all to say, see how the chess master is moving up to the penthouse, because there's different moves you can make. It has nothing to do with ball as much as how would this work? What's the game theory behind it? And then, by the way, you landed on like the best running backs on the slate and a defense that correlated with them, which you don't need, but it just worked out. So I don't know, Pat, your thoughts on that, but that's kind of the original concept of where I was going with it all.
Well, for ages, I mean, so there's been so much evolution over the past 12, 13 years since people really started getting into this and doing shows on it and talking through strategies. Fortunately, a lot of my good friends have switched over to best ball, and they're leaving the salary cap game to all of us, where the big money is week to week, which is really fantastic. But I remember when the idea of not only style, I vividly remember a week one. I can't remember what year it was. I want to say 2015. It was a Monday night game, and that's when the Monday night games were still a part of the main slate on DraftKings. It was just very obvious. Hey, Matt Ryan was going to be a good play that week. Julio was going to be a good play that week. Let's put them together. No one was talking about like there weren't articles about stacking or even in optimizers at that time, maybe custom ones that you guys had those sort of things, but just general lineup builders wasn't like, well, I need a double stack here and a bring back here from that same game to maximize the most points. But logically, that just made a lot of sense. So over the past 10 years, John, we've just heard so much about stacking, and now we're into 3-man stacks, 4-man stacks. I once watched a complete onslaught of the Houston Texans end up winning a millionaire maker that week that they played the Bucks, like 2 years ago. And now it's starting to seem to me like when I start to go through these, and it's funny because this trickles back to 3-max type of lineups, that I find that the overstacking generally works better in these single entries or 3-maxes now than it does in the giant field tournaments, simply because if you hit, you're just going to win.
Yeah, exactly. You're basically making a bet on that offense or that game, right? So you're playing the quarterback. You're playing at least one receiver, tight end, to pair along with that quarterback, and then you're maybe running it back with somebody from the same game, and you're really just hoping that that game stays close, takes off scoring wise. It's like making a bet on the over instead of if you think of it that way, instead of like making a whole DFS lineup. But it really does simplify things just to say, like, hey, I think this game's going to take off more than people are expecting. And then also when you do the overstacking, right, you're adding like 2-3 receivers from the same team. Maybe you're adding a running back, and then you're pairing it with 1 or 2 opposing players. You're also moving down kind of the depth chart, and you're moving down in projected ownership and real ownership, right? So like when you're playing that second or third wide receiver from a team, really only makes sense to play that guy if you're playing the quarterback, right? From the same team. And you'll see people like will play a third wide receiver, and they're not pairing it with a quarterback from either game. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because like that third wide receiver is probably not going to get 3 touchdowns to like land him on the winning lineup on his own. You probably want to be pairing that, be playing somebody down the depth chart with a quarterback from that game. But then overstacking like allows you to get to those players that are going to be very low owned in a correlated way that makes sense for the whole lineup.
And Tambo, I only say that in terms of single entry and 3-max because it still feels in the giant, let's call it the milli maker. So when you're playing against 175,000 other people, that there's only so many points that you might be able to squeeze out of one game, where it almost feels like a 9-player prop parlay to win the milli maker in a lot of senses sometimes.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. I think, the idea of the single entry, if it's like a 3,000 person or an 8,000 person, is one, not many people are going to commit to the overstack or the onslaught, as they call it, if it's just all one side or whatever. But using like the Tampa Bay example, let's say Mike Evans has a ceiling game and gets 33. That usually hurts Godwin in that scenario, just using that older example where Godwin might only have 15 or 18, but in a single entry, that's still fine. In the large field, somebody subbed out Godwin for somebody else that has 25 or 30, or they had a cheaper guy that got the same 18 that then boosted a running back that got 30 instead of your 20 up there. You're going to find something else with all those combinations. And that goes back to your original point of what should somebody do? Well, if they're just playing for fun and playing, $20 to win a milli every week, that's my budget. That's what I'm playing to win. See if it happens. Going to take a lot of luck, but technically it's there. But the point would be in the other spot, in the single entry, in that where you can get away with a little bit more. That's kind of the concept behind why you would rather be there, because you may not run into the exact combination like you're usually going to run into, even though no one's hitting the optimal too often in the $20 milli maker where the exact score. But you can see them. Last year, I do the takedown breakdown every Monday, going through that type of stuff, and you can see 20, 30 points shy, like sometimes even closer. So it's possible. It's just not likely, and that's the point behind it.
And John, does it make more sense when you're overstacking, let's say a five player game stack, quarterback, 2 pass catchers, and 2 players from the other team coming back? Do you do that with, does it make more sense when there is a cheap option available from that game, be it a third receiver who's the min, a $2,500 tight end, maybe a cheap running back who's an injury fill-in, only because that then alleviates your salary cap to the point where you can still jam in good players to go with them?
Definitely, yeah, that always helps. Like savings always helps. I'll say that I think as humans we do a bad job of evaluating value. So we do a bad job of we see like one of the top players in the game. So you see Jamar Chase at 10,000. It's really hard for us to imagine like how does he pay off that salary relative to like a 6,000 wide receiver. Say Debo Samuel. So like if Debo gets like 2 touchdowns and Jamar Chase gets 2 touchdowns, like that, the Debo 2 touchdowns are much, much more valuable if he's 5,500, compared to 10,000 for Jamar Chase. Just because that salary is so valuable elsewhere in your lineup. So yeah, the savings are very important. And the idea, like I think the game that Tam was talking about from last year, the Brenton Strange Jets in Mac Jones game, is I guess Jets Jaguars, like that those Jaguars pieces were pretty cheap. And I think even the Jets wide receivers were cheap. And that wasn't necessarily the highest projected scoring game for that week, but it was the highest projected scoring game per dollar. And so that's an important distinction. But like the idea is that when that game takes off, like if that game just matches a more expensive game, well, you've got the savings from the Jets Jaguars game, and you can allocate that elsewhere in your lineup to like one big spend up, or a more expensive defense that's going up against a backup quarterback in bad weather.
When thinking about which quarterbacks to select for your stacking options, Tambo, obviously price, as John just mentioned, is going to be a big part of that if you can get a cheap quarterback. But are there certain quarterbacks you'd almost scratch off that list? For example, Jaden Daniels is going to hit some ceiling games this year. But if he does that, it almost feels like it's very unlikely that he brings anyone with him because he's going to be rushing so much.
Yeah, you can definitely play quarterback naked, which is playing a quarterback without any pass catchers. A guy like Jaden Daniels would fit that mold.
Josh Allen?
Josh Allen, yeah, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, if he's just tush pushing all day or whatever it is, because, looking at that type of stuff. But oftentimes those guys, when they get to that level, have that price baked in. And to John's point, people have a hard time evaluating that value. I think you have to look at it as a slate as a whole, because if there's running backs that make more sense than that to spend the money on or whatever it might be, I think going back to it though for 2 seconds, like the wide receiver talk, because the quarterback kind of just hit it. But the wide receiver thing is like, he said, Brenton Strange, Adams, Wilson, guys like that, if they're cheap enough, people just somehow don't give them, they're going to play the same snaps, most likely, sometimes even more. They have opportunity to score. Sometimes that bad games equals bad because of bad defenses, just because the full team total is not there. The other team might still put up 25 points. They got to go likely to those guys. And if there's like a $3,000 price gap, it could still be a wide receiver one on a team. And the reason against like the Jamar Chase spot, and the reason I bring that up, going back to your quarterback question, is that's the other thing about selecting quarterbacks. It's often not me saying, everyone just sits there, like you said, in the Discord, on the YouTube chat, that guy sucks though. It's today. It's daily fantasy. I'm worried about this Sunday right in front of me right now today. And so what I'm looking at is combinations and things of like, okay, if I go with this, or like John said earlier, looking at projections, you saw Brenton Strange pop in a bunch. You saw Thomas Jr. pop in a bunch. Oh, I saw Adams over here. Now maybe I'm going to start thinking, what would that look like? Oh, it's actually super cheap to put them all together. And then others aren't thinking like that. So you can look for different things that way, but I care about sort of the full thought process. Pat, you and I talk about it all the time, about sort of like a betting parlay. I love John's article that he just put out about betting versus DFS. You can try and put together those parlays all day. They're fun. Anytime touchdown parlay is great. But when you can put it together this way, I kind of I want less things to need to happen while still making them realistic. Maybe it's a 4-game parlay of like a stack with a run back, couple really good running backs that I think will hit, and then whatever defense I land on. Okay, that could be my lineup. So I feel like it's better to look at it from that perspective when selecting quarterbacks versus trying to gauge talent and value.
I just want to add on there, I can't emphasize enough that's something that Tambo touched on. The daily and daily fantasy sports is so important. Like I know week 1, I'm going to get so many questions about Shadur Sanders. I'm going to say, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what you think somebody's long-term potential is. Doesn't matter like how good a football player you think they are. The only thing that matters is that number of fantasy points that they put up at the end of today. So like you want to be thinking about matchup. You do not want to be taking some long-term player that you think is great talent that today has a bad matchup in bad weather you against a good defense, like you want to be playing for today and for the number of fantasy points you think that that player is going to put up today with the opportunity that they have this week.
Let's talk about chalk. So when I talk about chalk, I mean projected high-owned players who end up coming through. There's going to be these guys at every single position. They tend to be either the best values on the slate because of price point, or they are the best players in the best matchups, and that's where everyone gravitates towards. John, I want to go to you first. Do you have any specific way to deal with, hey, 3 of my favorite plays are 3 of the 5 highest projected owned guys? Can you still play those players and then work yourself around it? Or do you have a rule of thumb where, I'm not going to play, like Brenton Strange is actually a really good example. He's the min, he's at a 1 position, and he's going to be super highly owned at this cheap price. For years, my rule of thumb would be cheap wide receiver in the $3,000 level that is going to garner between let's say over 15% ownership in any sort of contest, that I would just actively fade that guy at a principle, because wide receiver is there's a lot of wide receivers for one thing, and it's not like a backup running back coming in where you know that they're going to get 20 carries. The target share for the guy that replaces Davante Adams is not going to be the same as Davante Adams, where with a running back, it could be 1v1. Tight end works a little bit differently because there's no good tight ends, that you might as well just eat the chalk there and move on with your way, or try to figure out, like Tambo said, a different way to make your lineup around that sort of player. Are there any general rules of thumb when you look at, hey, this guy is going to be very highly owned, but I still want to play him?
I don't know if there's necessarily like a binary rule of thumb, like a yes, no, like always fade the chalk or never fade the chalk or anything like that. I've come to appreciate chalk more and more, I think. One thing we're seeing in DFS is like the kind of the takeover of the Sims, the takeover of our robot overlords, that are like these software programs that are programmatically and algorithmically evaluating, projection versus projected ownership. And one of the things that I've noticed is actually chalk is becoming a little bit more reasonable, I think, as time goes on. Like I'm a little bit more likely to eat more projected ownership as time goes on, because you've got so many people just avoiding the chalk because of these software programs. Like the chalk is usually chalk for a reason. And I'll say that the winning lineups most weeks have a handful of chalky pieces. Like most weeks, you're going to have the highest projected owned guy at some position in the lineup, or at least top 3 highest projected owned guy in the lineup. So you don't want to avoid chalk entirely. One thing that I will say, you brought up like the 3K wide receiver. That can be like precarious sometimes, right? Because sometimes that guy's just going to be running wind sprints down the field, right? Like basically the starting wide receiver went out. We've got this 3K guy stepping in as the third wide receiver now, but he's the third wide receiver. He's going to be running down the field. He's not going to get targets. Like a backup running back going in though, and he's like a Zach Charbonnet, say, taking over for Kenneth Walker is the prime example a couple times last season, where like there's a historical established precedent that Charbonnet, when Kenneth Walker sits, like they're totally fine making Charbonnet the main running back. And so I'm much more likely to like embrace the chalk, I think, at running back when I know there's like a confirmed, history that he's going to be the main running back, because the starter is down. I'll also say price is important. Like I'd much rather swing and miss on cheap chalk than on expensive chalk. Because if you swing and miss on expensive chalk, like your lineup is sunk. If you swing and miss at cheap chalk, like you said with like the tight end position, well, sometimes just no tight end has a day that you need to have him on your lineup, so you can like kind of eat a lower score from like a very cheap tight end. How
do you go about it, Tambo?
Yeah, so many thoughts there. I love that this topic is great for one. I think this is actually surprisingly one of the pieces of edge that are, people are all running at an edge and late swaps still an edge and so on and so forth. I think how people handle the chalk is certainly one of them. So I loved everything John talked about there. One thing I'll say, right off the hop is running back chalk, typically way better, more likely to eat it personally, because it's usually kind of like pitcher chalk in MLB. Like it sets up well, or there's somebody actually out and everyone wants to make a case for whatever. And, Bucky Irving is chalk. Sean Tucker comes in and gets you 28 points. No one plays Sean Tucker like 0.001%, but like Bucky was still fine. He got like 20 or 25 points. He's still really good chalk. So I will say that as far as like the edge that I'm talking about, there's a couple things too that stand out. The fade to fade. Oh, I never play this. Thank you. Like that's great, because it's not who you play, it's how you play them. I'll just act accordingly. I may have a $3,000 receiver in my lineups that it makes sense when I use him that way, or I may change it up. One thing about pivoting off like a $3,000 wide receiver to the 5K receiver on the same team, regardless of which way the chalk is on, which side, it's like that will get you a different roster construction. So portfolio manipulation or diversification, as some call it, that's the kind of way that you can go about it. And my last big one is the topic of good chalk versus bad chalk. Kind of easy to understand those examples, what's good, what's bad. But I think a lot of people play good chalk bad. And that's still an edge that's out there as well. And I'll give you the best example. Jamar Chase has been on the Millie Maker winning team quite a few times. And every time, well, at least the last 2 or 3 that I remember is with Joe Burrow. And what happens is he's like 20% at 9K or whatever it is. And people say, oh, you can't play a high-priced wide receiver like that if you're not getting like 40% to the field. Well, what you actually go and look at is he's 20%. So let's call him 20,000 out of 100,000 lineups that he's on. But of that 20,000, only like 2,000 have Joe Burrow with them because Joe Burrow is like 2% on the slate or something. And then people are like, oh, of course I'm never going to win when the chalk Jamar Chase got there. It's like, why didn't you play him with the quarterback that would also get the 3 touchdowns that he got? Like things like that are where people make mistakes and then get mad about the chalk. And it's like, you just didn't play good.
John, are there any other sort of mistakes just initially trying to set your lineup that you can think of just to tell people to avoid?
I would say the number one thing, and this actually kind of ties into the chalk, is that you really do not want to take a highest projected lineup from any source and just play that because it's going to be duplicated. Somebody else has got that same idea. Somebody else has access to those same projections and is playing that lineup. So even if you win, the 1 in a million chance that that lineup hits the Millie Maker, you're going to be splitting it. That's not a good idea. I think that's the number one thing I would avoid. And also I would say that if you're playing just the absolute highest projected lineup from a source, chances are like not only is it chalky, but like its total ownership is too high. So like if you do have access to projections and projected ownership, I think like taking a look at the sum of your projected ownership for your entire lineup is a good idea, and not playing a lineup that's like too high in projected.
Is there a number specifically that you would look at, be like, hey, I want to stay below that combined number of ownership?
I would say no, but part of the reason for that is because the number of games on an NFL slate varies actually throughout the year. If you think about it, like you start off with like 12, 13 games on the main slates, and then with bye weeks, sometimes I think we have like 8 game, 9 game main slates. Especially like you look at like American Thanksgiving week. You've got 3 games on Thursday, so that wipes out a big chunk of the main slate. So you end up like an 8-9 game main slate, and that affects the number of ownership, the number of available players. So if you think about it, like the ownership is going to be lower on everybody in a 13 game slate versus an 8 game slate because you've got 26 quarterbacks versus like 16 or 18.
I know a lot of people who watch this show and listen to this show are business owners, and a lot of them, they don't have the overhead to have a fancy downtown office with 1,000 employees. A lot of them, like myself, are just running it out of their home, in their basement, at a small workspace, whatever it might be, and Square gives you the flexibility to grow at your own pace. You can set up an online store in just a few clicks, and right now, listeners can get up to $200 off Square hardware when you sign up at square.com/go/mayo. If you run a small business that has customers coming in, be it in person or online, Square is where you're going to want to be to enhance your experience. For me, whenever I go in, I find it quick, I find it seamless, and then I'm out of there. Square keeps up so you don't have to slow down. Get everything you need to run and grow your business without any long-term commitments. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/mayo. That's SQUARE.com/GO/Mayo. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. Are you ready for some football? If not, Chubby's is ready to help you with their NFL collection. Whether you're tailgating, grilling, riding the highs and lows from the game from your couch, Chubby's has officially licensed NFL gear to keep you looking like an ultimate fanatic. Now, for me, I just really personally love Chubbies because they come in 3 different lengths, which are perfect for me. I like to show a lot of leg, and I'm not a super tall guy. So if I end up getting a small, they come out below my knees, and I look like I'm trying to be Eminem from the late 90s, which is not really the look that I'm going for here. And they have some bold designs for the NFL, but I like my monochromatic shorts when I'm going out. Show off some nice tan, some nice legs, and boom, we are looking good out there. For a limited time, use my exclusive code MAYO for $10 off at chubbyshorts.com/Mayo. Yes, that includes the NFL collection. Let the thighs out and the good times roll. If people go to 4for4.com/Mayo, get 25% off the DFS package where you get the tools. Ownership will be included with that, right?
Yeah, we will have both projected ownership and the regular weekly football projections.
Excellent. So, Tambo, what other quick mistakes do you think that people can just avoid off the hop? Just stop doing this.
It's hard because there's like a bunch of little things, and some of them are probably just easier to understand. Like the stacking piece is a big one in football. Like, don't go out and build a lineup with just all random pieces. We talked about the parlay situation already. I guess one that I would throw out there that is a bit unique, you just talked about it 4for4. It's the same at Ship It Nation. Everybody sort of thinks about this, but I think having an optimizer is important. I think it's a myth in DFS that people think it's only for people that play 150, and that's because it's obviously like a necessity at that point. It makes things much easier and all that. But to John's point, the easiest way to find the simple solution to what everybody else is doing, to have a starting point, is to have an optimizer and run this stuff through it and see, okay, this is what the majority of people are on. That you're way ahead of all the casual players that are just going to jump in and build a lineup randomly. And it matters more in other sports like NBA, because people are literally starting 30, 40 points off the optimal or off the highest projected, and then they're not late swapping as the night goes on. Now in football, not the same, but just saying people are literally just making stuff up as they go along and throwing it together, hand builds or going way off the board. Okay, I saw that. Now let me go do this. I think having an optimizer is key in DFS. Even if you are just playing one lineup, you can do what I call virtual hand building. You can get your thoughts and ideas in there and then start to skim through and say, oh, I kind of like that one. And maybe you make a quick adjustment, but you'll have more than one reason on why you like that. And I talk a lot about that. So I think that's probably another thing I would say is one that people don't pay enough attention to.
Just to explain to people, when Tambo and John mention late swap, what they're talking about is that the games at 1 o'clock Eastern are going to lock, then you can't change those players. But in your lineup, the 4 o'clock games that are coming around, you can still make a swap with any player that is at your salary cap or below of what you have remaining. So if you get way up in a tournament on the early slate, you can pivot off to some chalkier plays or higher projected plays. Or if you're behind, you can put guys in to those spots that are a bit lesser owned or have potentially higher upside but lower floors that you can catch back up and maybe min cash, or if you're going for the very top of the leaderboard. So the biggest thing to look at, I think, immediately, John, would be if you can play the latest players possible in your flex spot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because that enables you to have more options if you want to late swap. I'll say, people think of late swap as not being important in football, but last year, I had a lineup that had Quentin Johnston. The first week that he broke out, he had 2 touchdowns. I think about 1% ownership on Fanduel, and that lineup that I had a bunch of late spots available, and it did not have Cooper Kupp, who was like a chalky wide receiver that day. I went to that lineup, saw that it was doing very well with low-owned players in the early games, switched to Cooper Kupp, who ended up having a big game in the night, in one of the 4 p.m. games, or I think actually the night game, because FanDuel included the night game. And that lineup ended up winning $200,000. If I had not made that late swap, I would not have won that contest that week. So it's so important to pay attention. And you can think through, if I've got a low-owned player that goes absolutely bananas in the 1 p.m. game, so I want to switch that to a chalkier lineup, to a higher projected lineup, or vice versa. Let's say I have a high-owned player who doesn't do well in a lineup. Do I want to maybe switch that to be something a little bit more off the board so I can try to catch up more in the 4 p.m. games?
Well, Tambo, John's talking about it as the idea of winning a tournament. Now, obviously, that's the example that we all want to point to, but I know that you've told me a bunch of times that one of the difference between very good players and casual players is that when they see that they're down after the 1 p.m. slate, they just don't do anything, where you can salvage min cashes out of a bunch of lineups if you just make some late swaps.
Yeah, and I would say start with whatever your best opportunities are, meaning if you're in a spot, a smaller field, there might be a blocker opportunity where you can put somebody in. And I actually have a couple funny stories that involve John on late swap, but I'll give those in a second. But just to note, The other point would be like, when you got your full portfolio, I'm looking at starting at the lineups that matter most. Like what's going to either put me in the position, or what if it's a higher dollar, can I escape with a min cash? There's no sense playing the chalk stack in the afternoon. If my 2 morning running backs busted, that was my strategy, but now I'm adjusting. But you can also set up your lineups. And that's the first quick story. Is last year it was the Chargers playing the Bengals on Sunday Night Football, and I got third and John got fourth in this tournament. And I had enough money left for Chase Brown in the flex spot, but because that wasn't going to win it for me, and I essentially knew it because of his ownership was going to be off the board, it was a great matchup, I went to T. Higgins in that spot, who was $100 less, and I just knew he'd be lower owned, and that gave me a chance to win the whole thing. Giant Squid ended up coming first and second while winning the Millie Maker on DraftKings the same day, but maybe John remembers that. That was a close call there. And then it was actually a few years ago, my worst ever late swap was, for good reason. I have a process, so like I can't be mad about it, but I swapped a running back tight end combination in the afternoon, and it was I don't know if John won 200K or I think you got second place. It was a Millie to first, and it was I swapped a Raiders and a San Francisco spot, like Kittle and maybe it was Josh Jacobs' time for whoever it was. Anyway, it cost me, I finished like 197th, and it would have been second place if I had just left it. But John came in second place and would have been third place had I have not made that swap. So it happens to the best of us. That was a 6-figure mistake, but I don't view it as a mistake because it was my process, and I switched for a reason, and I followed what my process is, usually looking at the projections, thinking of the situational items that matter. And there's a lot more to it, but I mean, that would just be the baseline of the two.
I'll add that if you're going to be doing this late swapping, you need to have the mental fortitude to understand that it can go awry too. It might be best if you're going to make the swap, just tell yourself, I'm not going to calculate the score for where this would have ended up if I had not made the swap. Unless you end up winning a ton of money, then go back and calculate the score.
Yes, only if you win is when we count things, John. That's right.
Tambo, how have you been dealing with people using the Sims now, simulations, and making projections out for tournaments themselves, and then using lineups from that to give yourself the best EV? There was a lot of talk about this, and I know a lot of people within the industry do talk about it. What percentage of players do you think are using these tournament simulations to actually make their picks of the overall in the Millionaire Maker? What percentage? Is it higher or lower than 1%?
I think it's higher than 1%. I think the bigger combination, without trying to get exact numbers, but I'll say this with confidence, is what percentage of the best, most profitable players are using contest sims is a lot higher and a much bigger number than players actually using contest sims in general, because you've seen it from running businesses like this in the past, Pat. I've got relationships and partnerships with people in this business. It's not everyone is using the contest sims packages as much as they're using optimizers. But I know that's not even close. I'm saying, but of the highest profitable players, most of them are at least looking at contest sims, if not using them in some way, shape, or form. And I know that from just hanging out with them. Not everybody does, but John knows this too. If you go to these events, a lot of people that are the best players in the world and the most profitable are using contest sims.
John, do you have to use them? Do you have to use them to make your lineups, or is it almost like what Tambo was saying with the optimizer earlier? Just even if you're playing a single entry or you don't want to run 150 lineups, looking at an optimizer and what it spits out and just kind of mentally calculating, okay, I'm seeing names pop up here that I didn't think that I was going to do. How can I make this into one instead of just copying a lineup? Is that one way to use them? Is that how people are using them? Because Tambo says the best players in the world are using these, or they're at least looking at them, but these were the best players before Sims existed anyway.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what the Sims are doing is they're basically trying to avoid that big mistake we talked about earlier, where somebody runs an optimizer, takes the highest projected lineup, with one projection source, and then puts that into a contest, and they go, "Wow, this was the highest projected lineup. Why didn't it win?" As well, you need to evaluate, things like correlation, like just the highest, hitting optimize, right, is not going to put any correlation into your lineup. It's not going to evaluate ownership at all, right? So the Sims try to do that programmatically. I don't generate my lineups using Sims. I have a couple of different Sim tools that I look at. I don't generate my lineups with the Sims, just because I think what the Sims are really trying to do is something that I've been doing anyway, which is basically just evaluating, the correlation and total or multiplied out ownership of a lineup, and then picking those like best lineups I think that if you're using the Sims, you have to be a little bit careful, similar to how you need to be careful using an optimizer, just because a lot of the Sims put in their own projections. And even if you're like uploading your own projections, like they'll kind of like override that in some way behind the scenes you're not necessarily aware of. So just because I kind of know from years of not using Sims, like how to evaluate that correlation and ownership myself, I tend to not use the Sims to generate my lineups. But I do think like if you want to just do one or a handful of lineups, you don't want to think about things too much. You're much better off using a Sim product to generate a few lineups that are not the highest projected, that are not the highest owned, than going to like an optimizer and just hitting optimize and taking the top 3 lineups and putting those into it.
Tambo, maybe I'm wrong about this, but simulations in general strike me as better suited and more profitable for people that are going to max enter small slates. Like Showdown, for example.
I mean, certainly powerful in something like that, because in a thing like Showdown for certain, which is maybe a whole nother topic, but just to say it, like obviously there's a lot more duplicated lineups.
Yes.
And things like contest sims are literally looking for ways to play it good or play it smart without duplicating everyone. To John's point, like he just mentioned it there about it, like, the Sims are kind of already doing it. There's a famous Utica quote where he was on with Levitan saying, "My brain is the Sim," and everyone laughed at it. What he was saying is, and to John's point, I know I've always been doing it this way, is I'm thinking about game theory and leverage and ways to construct that are different naturally. I'm trying to think those steps ahead and those ideas of how can I beat the field, not who's going to play good today. Again, it's daily fantasy. So what the contest sims are doing, and which is different than the player simulation, but the contest sims are running to say, okay, if the field's doing this, then here's ways you could do stuff to get differently and play it more profitable. What people seem to forget, and most people just see an avatar on DraftKings or whatever site they're on and say, oh, if I just go buy their product for X amount per month, I can just press a button and I'm good. Your inputs are your outputs. So if you have shitty ownership, or if you have bad projections, if you don't have anything right, then what you're getting can say it's amazing, but it could be horrible. So that's why it's important to pair things together, like our Ship It Nation with Saber Sim as an example. Like we're using our stuff. I'm taking data, bringing it across, and then getting ideas from that. But everything that John just said ties in directly to that as well. It's like it's not required that you need them. You can still build really good lineups without them. I just wanted to answer your original question that going to these live finals, meeting these top players, a lot of them are using contest sims to really focus on what the field is doing and how they can get unique against that field.
Have a few more things before we get out of here. You mentioned the daily and daily fantasy sports, John. What are some angles that we can look at week to week? I know that we can look at the line and say, hey, this game, team totals. This team is projected to score a lot of points. The team they're playing is projected to score a lot of points. Indoor versus outdoor, the fast track versus a potential. I mean, I guess weather is probably a good way to look at this. How much does weather influence the picks that you make in your lineups, or who you want to actively go overweight on or underweight on when you're playing a lot of lineups? More so, let's say, from the middle of October on.
Yeah, actually, I think people still tend to underestimate the indoor games sometimes. I'm particularly looking at the Colts. People not a very popular offense, relative to the other teams. But man, when they play indoors, like that can be a big advantage. I'll say that you don't want to overestimate weather, just because it's usually baked into the lines. Like the NFL Vegas lines that get set each week. Those are incorporating and then adjusting for the weather. So you don't want to double count things. Like if you use a projection source, that's going to be baked into the projections is the team totals, which are then incorporating the weather. I will say though that if a team or game is seeing low ownership, but it's indoors and it's got about an average total, again, kind of looking at the Colts oftentimes, that's a team I want to give some consideration to, because you just outdoors in the rain or the snow, oftentimes those games, somebody's going to get a lead, and then especially later in the season, sometimes like teams aren't always playing to win at the end of the season, so they're just going to let's just run the ball and get out of here in the nasty weather. Indoors, those games can take off. I think that if you see an unexpectedly high total in a game, or unexpectedly high score in a game, oftentimes it's in an indoor game. So it's something that I consider, but you also want to be aware of the fact, like, I don't necessarily want to play a highly owned game just because it's indoors, but a lower owned game that people are overlooking that might be indoors. I'm like, well, that game has at least the potential to go over its total, say, more often than a game that's like outdoors in the harsh conditions in later in the year.
It's funny that we look at this every week, Tambo, and we go through everything. We're like, hey, what are the 3 highest projected games? Let's start with game number 3 of those highest projections, just because that's inherently going to be lower owned.
Yeah, John said a key point there. I was going to hit it if he didn't. It's a lot of what people are trying to do when I talked about those chess pieces earlier, trying to give their queen or their knight magic powers. It's like it doesn't exist. And that's when people are trying to add on to something that's already baked in. The projections, a good projection set has this type of stuff baked in. It then leaks in and overflows into the ownership. So it all ties together. So I wouldn't be adjusting too much for that kind of stuff. And Pat, that's why you and I do the show the way we do it. We don't spend hours and hours on picks and plays. We're looking at roster constructions. And if people are going here, is there a way? And you can do that in your optimizer. You can do that via watching the right content, like shows where we're focusing on playing the game versus the picks and plays. The picks and plays are a product of the process, right? Of going through and doing it all. Yes, when Darius Slayton ends up on that Million Maker winner, you want to buy his jersey or thank Darius Slayton, but it was your process that brought you to him because of what he allowed you to get, which in turn eventually ended up being on the winning lineup. So just saying it like that, I think it's important to go through and know that type of stuff. Then you can make slight adjustments. If you say, well, this game's indoors, it's already baked in, like they talked about on that strategy show I watched before the season, but this game is also indoors, I'm just going to give the secondary indoor game a slight bump and that one a slight decrease. I'm not doing too much. I'm just saying I'd like a little bit more of this one. And if that's right over that one, you could be in a really good spot when everyone says, of course it was the other indoor game. And it's not like you get a huge ownership discount probably because multiple people thought the same, but you'll get something. And then that just leads to some different builds. Maybe the receivers or running backs cost different within those games. So it gets you a different construction altogether. There's just lots of different ways you can do it, but I wouldn't be going too far outside the box, worried about matchups, schemes. Matchups is another good one. I don't want to keep going, but just quickly. Oh, there's no way this guy could have a good matchup. Again, daily, today, one slip, one ankle roll, one missed tackle, whatever it might be, shoelace tackle, bang, gone. So much for that matchup. He has 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown, and it's only the first quarter. Bad matchup for running backs, but he's there already. That can happen.
Let's do some final tips before we get out of here. I'm going to hit with you with one. There's basically only one thing I'm good at as it pertains to daily fantasy sports, and it's picking defenses. Do not get overwhelmed by bad defenses. What you want is to face teams that are going to be passing the ball. The more pass attempts that your defense can face, the more fantasy points that they can score. It is the best, especially if they have a high pressure rate at the same time. Like the Giants are going to be an awesome team to stream at the very bottom at like $2,200 for the first few weeks because they're going to generate a ton of pressure. They might be able to keep games close, and just more dropbacks, more pressure equals more mistakes, more sacks, more turnovers, more pick sixes. John, I really don't care if my defense gives up 30 points. I just want them to have the ability to score touchdowns and generate turnovers.
Yeah, any team that has Jameis Winston on it, even if he's on the bench, I think it's making an impact. So I'm interested in playing the opposing defense.
So what other final tips that we haven't covered do you think, just 101 or even a bit more in-depth, that you think that people should be doing more often than they are now?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think the most important things are things we covered early in the show, which is, just kind of, play within your means, play, with smart bankroll management, like play with good contest selection, know what your goals are. Like you might just want to play a 50-50 each week. Like DFS should be fun. I know we've thrown out a lot of like terms here, like optimizers and simulations, and we're talking about projected ownership and projections. Like you should be playing this game initially just to have fun. Like know what your goals are. If you know you're going to be happy, putting $20 in each week, and if you double that, on a given week, that's going to give you a fun Sunday. Then just have fun doing that. The game can be, it's a little bit like golf, right? The game can be as complicated as you want to make it, but it can also just be fun to go out to the course and hit the ball, right? Drive around in the car. So have good bankroll management, good contest selection, and just, don't be afraid to just go out there and have fun.
Tambo, it sounds like John's saying don't beat yourself before it starts. Have an actual, hey, play with what you think you can do and what will make you happy at the same time.
Yeah, you're a golfer. He used the analogy, Pat. Sometimes you go out and you're with someone or yourself who just shoots 100 plus. It's not the greatest day, but did you have a good time? Do you have a few drinks, the hot dog at the turn, hanging out with your buddies, whatever it might be? It's all what you make of it. That's really life advice, not just DFS advice. But my final tip, I guess, to answer your original question would be to play satellites. I think, and if you don't know enough about them or anything, like obviously you talked about DFS Mastermind, Shipping Agent, you guys have 4 for 4. You can check it out anywhere and get tips on this. But so many people are throwing $20 trying to win $1 million in that. You could play a $12 single entry that still pays $10K or $20K for first in some of these weeks. And then you can play a $9 satellite. It's $21 instead of 20. The $9 satellite could win you a ticket to like a 555 milli maker, where at least your odds would be that much better. And it's 10,000. Look, $1 million's life changing. To most people, they've never won 1,000, and that's okay. I hope they do. I want to see thousands of people win $1,000+. But 10K is still a lot of money, and it keeps you in the game for a very long time. And then the ability to take it more serious or go away from what we talked about, just having fun and getting a little bit more after it. But I think play satellites, those are an opportunity in itself, where it's a much smaller field. Even if you're playing the best players in the world in those, which oftentimes you can be, it's still the odds are there based on playing against less people than just going up and playing against the best players in a 1,000 or 2,000 or 100,000 person tournament for that matter.
It's funny to circle it back to the beginning and setting what your expectations are. I was throwing entries into the Millie Maker, the big Millie Maker every single week, like the $20 or $25 one. Sometimes it's 15. Just because, if this hits, I want to win $1 million. I saved so much money by just stop playing those contests and losing every single week. I would throw in 6 or 8, whatever it might be, essentially lotto tickets. And all I did was I just played the extra 153 max. And Tambo, I think we had 3 weeks in a row. I won like 20K, 5K, and 10K in back-to-back weeks just by simply playing that contest versus putting my money in the Millie Maker.
And they wouldn't have won the Millie. None of
it would have won like $40 in the Millie.
Right. And even if they had of, it's like, oh, well, didn't win the Millie, but I wasn't playing it anyway because I've adapted to this and learned and started playing this way. There's my 20K. If you started, most people would take 20K in a heartbeat right now and would not be thinking about the Millie they didn't win or weren't going to get. But yet they want to play for the FOMO or the fear of missing out of like the $1 million. I got to play it in there too. And then they just week after week, they wonder where their bankroll went. It's like you went into the casino to play roulette or blackjack with a set budget where you feel like you're pretty good about the game. And then on the way out, you just keep dipping another $100 into the slot machines and then wonder where all your money went. That happens.
So I think setting that expectation, John, was good for me. It's like, hey, if I can win the 30K up top in this contest, like I'm set for the year. This is fantastic. But even in those contests, if I come fourth, I'm still getting a really good payday. Like I'm not going to sneeze at winning five grand in a contest. Whereas if I play in the Millie Maker, like I need to basically have the best to win $5,000 in the Millionaire Maker. I need to have a 0.0001 lineup just to get that high up anyway. And then I'd be pissed I didn't win.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons I really like, the single entry contests. I think they tend to have a much higher ROI, even for the best players. Something you want to think about is, single entry or 3 max. Like the absolute best players in the world can only enter that one time, or 3 times, right? So that's something to think about. It really limits, the highest end competition. Whereas like in the Millie Maker or the multi-entry contest, like the best players in the world will usually have 150 lineups. So something you want to consider.
That will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Use code Mayo at Underdog right now. And if you enter a $5 pick'em for week 1, you will just get $50 in bonus funds in your Underdog account, win or lose. I hope you win. But if you lose, you still get that $50 anyway. That is ROI for you. If you lose and get $50, and you can do that by using code Mayo at Underdog right now. John, what do you have on the go at 4for4.com this season? If anyone wants to join any of the packages at 4for4, be it DFS, the betting tools, the betting content, the Discord, or if it's just regular season-long fantasy football, the most accurate rankings of the past 15 years, 4for4.com/Mayo will get you 25% off all of those packages. But John, I'm very excited to check out what you got going on. Tell the people what it is.
Yeah, actually, this is the time to be joining 4for4 because you get the access to the incredible season-long content, right? So you want to get that before you're doing your drafts, for your season-long leagues. But then for the DFS package, which with the 25% off coupon code, I think is less than $20 for the entire season on top of the the regular season package. I'm going to be doing an article for the main slate each week for Thursday Night Football. For Monday Night Football, we'll have a Sunday morning Discord chat, last minute, stardom, sit-em questions. We're going to have my weekly projections picks. We're going to have the DFS MVP podcast. So there's a lot going on for 4 for 4. I think it is well worth the money.
Tambo, shipitnation.com. What are you guys rolling out this year?
Yeah, first off, I'd say think of it like a stack. A lot of people have a laptop, a phone, they've got a calendar and whatever else. Like you can put things together. I think adding 4 for 4, getting Ship It Nation together is definitely a good idea. If you like what John's doing and Pat, you like myself, shipitnation.com has you covered for all the sports across the board. But for NFL, there is NFL only packages. There is slate plans. We've got it set up where you can use the Stone, the best tool in DFS, to actually go through and see all the data in one place. Our optimizer partnership with SaberSim. And then we have Ship It Games, Pat, which I'll run down quick because you've asked me about it before, but it's essentially like an online final. For the year, we're giving away over $79,000 in cash and prizes to our members. So if you're a member at Ship It Nation, another reason just to stack it with whatever else you want to add on, the winner will receive at least $20,000 cash. There is 50 golden ship-its, like Willy Wonka golden tickets, that will be given out on the season to members of shipitnation.com, and you'll have a chance to play in the first ever NFL Ship It Games.
Sounds good. I'm going to come in and win.
Yeah, do it, man. I'm all for it. I think anybody that's out there, even if it's just adding it, like I said, to your stack, you like stuff at 4 for 4, I recommend getting that. You add whatever it is you think is best for you and your own content consumption. But this is just a way. It's almost like your content is a contest, right? You're coming in, you're buying the package, you'll get good information to stack with whatever else you have out there, and then you're able to also have a chance at winning up to 20,000 plus for first already.
I would recommend that everyone puts this show in their rotation because Fridays we're going to be doing these main slate picks for DFS for the week. It'll be the cap off to the Pat Mayo experience. You can download at Spotify and Apple. You can watch the video on Spotify and YouTube. Sub to the channel while you're here. Smash the like button, and I will see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience.